Have you ever wondered if your birth year had anything to do with your destiny? Elon Musk's mind flickered back to that question as he sat in the sleek, modern conference room at SpaceX's headquarters in Hawthorne, California. His fingers rested lightly on the glass table in front of him, the hum of the busy office buzzing faintly in the background. It was just another day in his world, a world of rockets, electric cars, and ambitious plans to make humanity a multiplanetary species. Yet, today, something felt different. This question, a seemingly simple inquiry, had come to him through an unexpected source. A viral post on social media about a theory that linked a person's birth year with their destiny had caught the attention of millions. According to this theory, the year you were born determined key aspects of your personality, your life path, and, believe it or not, your success. Elon chuckled to himself. That's nonsense, he thought, dismissing it out of hand. After all, he'd always been a man of reason, a believer in science, data, and logic. He had to be. He was working to send humans to Mars and revolutionize the electric car industry. There was no room for superstitions or fate. Still, the idea of a predetermined destiny based on something as simple as the year you were born lingered in his mind. The theory suggested that certain birth years seemed to be associated with extraordinary success. The post highlighted people born in 1971, like Musk, who had gone on to change the world. Names like Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, and Jeff Bezos all popped up as examples of those who had shaped the future, all born in the same year. The more he read, the more unsettlingly accurate it seemed. Elon Musk, born in 1971, the post continued. A man who would become a symbol of technological innovation, a visionary who would take on the impossible and make it possible. It was almost too perfect. Wait a minute, he thought, a shiver running down his spine. Could this be real? He wasn't the type to believe in astrology or fate, but the connection to his own life was almost too uncanny. The tech giants mentioned had shaped industries. Perhaps the theory wasn't entirely without merit. Musk pushed aside his doubts. It was probably just a coincidence. But when the theory went viral, it caught the attention of many others, including a couple of well-known figures in the scientific community. One such individual, a popular neuroscientist named Dr. Robert Lang, had publicly defended the birth year theory. He argued that your birth year created a unique neurological predisposition based on the social, economic, and even astrological events that occurred during that time. According to him, these factors were capable of subtly influencing the mindsets of individuals and shaping their futures in profound ways. This wasn't just another random theory. This was a well-thought-out hypothesis that seemed to resonate with people, and not just in Silicon Valley. Dr. Lang appeared on a talk show to explain how certain generations, especially those born around the 1970s, seemed to share common traits: ambition, defiance of authority, and an unwavering desire to push boundaries. Musk was intrigued but skeptical. Still, the idea gnawed at him, and before long, it became more than just a passing thought. The more he thought about it, the more Musk realized that there was a deeper connection. He had always felt like he was on a mission, driven to change the world, sometimes to the point of obsession. But the idea that it was somehow tied to his birth year made him uncomfortable. Was he simply a product of the time he was born into, or was there more to it? Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning, the viral post had said. Musk's curiosity grew. Maybe it wasn't just about him. Maybe it was a question worth exploring for all of humanity: is there a deeper connection between our birth years and our destinies? A couple of weeks later, Musk's skepticism was put to the test. The press had picked up on the debate, and Elon was asked about the theory during an interview on CNBC. His expression remained impassive, but inside, his mind raced. The host, eager to hear his thoughts, pressed him on the matter. Elon, what do you think about this idea? Do you believe that your birth year, 1971, has played a role in shaping who you are today? The room fell silent for a moment. Musk stared at the interviewer, caught off guard. The question was both oddly personal and incredibly public. Could his answers really reveal anything about who he was and why he did the things he did? Musk leaned forward slightly in his chair, eyes narrowing. I think it's an interesting idea, he said slowly, his voice steady. But I'm not someone who believes in fate. I believe in creating my own path. I didn't get to where I am by relying on some theory about birth years. He paused, then added, but I'll admit, it's intriguing. The response was a mixture of skepticism and curiosity, but it sparked something in him, a desire to know more. Musk, known for his relentless pursuit of knowledge, couldn't let the theory go. Could there be some truth to it? Days turned into weeks, and the theory continued to circle in his thoughts. He found himself researching not only the idea but also the other influential people born in 1971. There were surprising parallels, not just between their achievements, but in their personalities and ambitions. The more he dug into their backgrounds, the more the theory seemed to hold water. But Musk was a scientist at heart. He didn't take things at face value. He needed proof, evidence, hard facts. And so, he began his own investigation into the birth year theory, digging into data, analyzing trends, and reaching out to experts in various fields to get their take. Despite his growing interest, he remained hesitant. Could a single theory truly define his entire life's work? Was he just another product of his generation? Or was there something more? As the days passed, Musk found himself revisiting his early life, the influences that had shaped his decisions, his success, and his failures. It wasn't just about his birth year. It was about how the world had shaped him, and how he had chosen to shape the world. But the question still lingered, unanswered: was there more to the theory than he was willing to admit? The story had only just begun. Elon Musk wasn't born in a typical American family. His story began in Pretoria, South Africa, on June 28, 1971, to a Canadian mother and a South African father. From the very beginning, Musk was an enigma, brilliant, introverted, and driven. The combination of his mother's creative spirit and his father's engineering mindset made for a unique blend of ambition and intellect that would shape the man he would become. Growing up in the shadow of his father's cold, perfectionist expectations, Elon faced challenges early on. His father, Elon Musk, was a mechanical engineer, a man who believed in high standards and discipline. His mother, May Musk, was a dietitian and model, a woman who offered the warmth and encouragement that Elon craved but often couldn't find in his relationship with his father. Despite their differences, the Musk family dynamic set the stage for a young boy with dreams much larger than his reality. Elon's early years were marked by loneliness and isolation. He didn't fit in with the other kids. He was a voracious reader, losing himself in books on topics ranging from science fiction to engineering, all while his classmates focused on more typical childhood pursuits. By the time he was 10, Musk had already taught himself how to program computers, a skill that would eventually set him apart in the tech world. But childhood wasn't all about books and computers. Elon's life was marked by physical struggles as well. He was bullied relentlessly at school, his peers teasing him for his awkwardness, his large glasses, and his quiet demeanor. He recalls one particular instance when a group of bullies beat him so badly that he had to be hospitalized. It was a painful memory that Musk often referred to in interviews, not as a source of bitterness but as a defining moment in his life. "I learned to build thick skin," Elon said in one interview, reflecting on his time being bullied. "The world doesn't care about your feelings. You have to push forward, no matter what." This resilience became the cornerstone of Musk's personality, an unyielding drive that would later fuel his ventures into space and electric cars. But as a young boy, it wasn't just the pain of bullying that haunted him, it was the constant tension between his parents. His father's harshness and his mother's more nurturing approach created a confusing and often turbulent home life. Elon often found himself caught in the middle, struggling to understand his place in the world. His father's influence was particularly strong, though it was a double-edged sword. Elon Musk had high expectations for his son, pushing him toward achievement and success. But Elon, often at odds with his father's authoritarian style, felt a growing sense of dissatisfaction. The father-son relationship became more strained as Elon entered his teenage years. He found himself increasingly disconnected from the values that Errol had instilled in him. Elon didn't want to follow a traditional path, he wanted to change the world. But how? And, more importantly, could he do it on his own? As he grew older, Elon began to find a sense of purpose, though not from his family. It was in the world of technology and innovation that Musk found his calling. His mother's encouragement to follow his dreams and think outside the box resonated deeply with him. Yet, it was his own determination that pushed him to take the bold steps necessary to create something groundbreaking. In his late teens, Musk made the life-changing decision to move to Canada to attend Queen's University. It was a bold choice, leaving behind the familiar comforts of South Africa for a world that seemed both thrilling and intimidating. There was something magnetic about the idea of forging his own path, away from his father's shadow and into a new realm of possibilities. He would soon make the leap to the University of Pennsylvania, where he would pursue both economics and physics, disciplines that would later intertwine in his visionary ideas. But it wasn't just academics that defined Elon's college years, it was his entrepreneurial spirit. During his time at Penn, Musk co-founded a company called Zip2, which provided business directories and maps for newspapers. The company's success would set the stage for what Musk would come to be known for, a relentless drive to innovate. In the early days of Zip2, Musk didn't just work from 9 to 5. He poured everything into his company. He lived in a cramped office, sleeping on the floor and showering at the local YMCA. He didn't mind the hardships, they were part of the journey. In his mind, failure wasn't an option. He was working for something much larger than himself, a mission that would change the course of human history. Musk eventually sold Zip2 to Compaq for nearly $300 million. But instead of taking the money and walking away, he reinvested it into a new venture, X.com, which would later become PayPal. The success of PayPal, once it was acquired by eBay for $1.5 billion, solidified Musk's place as a Silicon Valley entrepreneur. It was clear that Musk wasn't just a dreamer, he was a doer. But while his business ventures soared, Musk's personal life remained tumultuous. His first marriage to Justine Wilson ended in a painful divorce, and his second marriage to actress Tallulah Riley was also rocky. Despite the external successes, Elon often found himself struggling with inner conflict. The pressure to succeed, combined with his inability to connect emotionally with others, weighed heavily on him. Yet, he continued to push forward, driven by a vision that extended far beyond personal happiness. The greatest challenge, however, came when he set his sights on space exploration. Musk had always been fascinated by the idea of humans becoming a multiplanetary species. In 2002, he founded SpaceX with the goal of making space travel more affordable and eventually colonizing Mars. It was an audacious dream, one that many thought was impossible. But for Musk, the idea wasn't about proving others wrong, it was about proving something to himself. As the years passed, Musk's public persona transformed from the quiet, introverted tech genius into one of the most high-profile figures in the world. His companies, SpaceX, Tesla, Neuralink, and The Boring Company, pushed the boundaries of technology and innovation. And through it all, Elon's drive, his unshakable resolve to shape the future, remained constant. But the question still lingered in the back of his mind, could the birth year theory actually hold some weight? Was there more to it than just coincidence? Had his very existence been shaped by the year 1971, the same year that saw the birth of other tech giants? He wasn't sure. But one thing was certain, the journey to find out would push him to explore even deeper facets of his life. It was a theory, a puzzle he hadn't solved yet, but like every other challenge Musk had faced, he wasn't about to back down. As the months passed, Elon Musk couldn't shake the question that had begun to burrow into his mind. Was the theory about birth years, particularly his own, more than just a viral sensation? The idea had started to take root, slowly influencing his thoughts and actions. Although he remained skeptical, there were moments when he found himself reflecting on how certain people, particularly those born in 1971, seemed to embody the qualities that had shaped his life. Musk's daily routine hadn't changed much. He was still obsessed with the missions of SpaceX and Tesla, constantly working on groundbreaking technology, tirelessly pushing the limits of what was possible. But now, there was a shadow of doubt, a gnawing feeling at the back of his mind. Could his relentless drive for success, his constant need to push boundaries, be the result of something beyond his control? Could his birth year, his very existence, have set him on a path he had never truly chosen? He began researching other figures born in 1971. The names were everywhere, men and women who had shaped industries, who had redefined success, who had fought through personal struggles to reach incredible heights. Steve Jobs, Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates. Even beyond tech, there were political leaders and cultural icons born in that year, each person embodying an era of innovation and transformation. Musk found it harder to ignore the strange, almost uncanny patterns. And yet, despite the mounting evidence, he couldn't bring himself to fully embrace the idea that his success, or the success of his peers, was the result of something as arbitrary as a birth year. He was Elon Musk. He was the one who built rockets from the ground up. He had transformed the car industry with Tesla. He had created technology that changed the world. It was not the year he was born that shaped his success, it was his vision, his tireless work ethic, and his ability to overcome the odds. Still, the more he thought about it, the more questions emerged. Could his determination to succeed, his unyielding belief in himself, be tied to something deeper? Could the social and economic climate of 1971 have imprinted on him in ways he had never considered? Was there a psychological and neurological factor at play? Is it possible that we're all products of our birth years? He muttered to himself one evening as he sat in his office, surrounded by blueprints and prototypes. The words hung in the air, almost absurd in their simplicity, but they lingered in his mind. In an attempt to understand more, Musk reached out to experts in psychology and neuroscience. Dr. Robert Lang, the neuroscientist who had publicly supported the birth year theory, was one of the first to respond. Lang had written extensively about how societal and historical events influenced the psychology of generations. He argued that the collective experiences of people born during certain periods of time could have profound effects on their behavior and mindset. For Musk, this was an opportunity to dig deeper into the question that had consumed him. They arranged a private meeting in California. When Musk sat down with Dr. Lang, he couldn't help but feel a mix of skepticism and curiosity. Lang was a charismatic figure, with sharp eyes and a voice that exuded confidence. He spoke with authority, not like a theorist but like someone who had spent years developing a profound understanding of the mind. Elon, think about it, Lang began, your generation, born in 1971, was exposed to a unique set of social, political, and technological events. The Cold War was still ongoing. The world was on the brink of massive technological change. The civil rights movements, the space race, the rise of personal computing, all of these things shaped your generation in ways that people today can't even fully understand. Your brain, as a child, was exposed to all of this, shaping your cognitive development in ways that are now beginning to show. Musk listened intently, although a part of him still found it hard to accept. He had always prided himself on being a self-made man, someone who controlled his destiny through sheer willpower. But Lang's argument struck a chord. Could the societal pressures and global events of his youth have subconsciously shaped his drive? Musk had always been fascinated by space exploration and technology. Was that a natural curiosity, or was it the result of living through an era that prioritized innovation? You were a child during the rise of computers, Lang continued. You grew up in a world where technological breakthroughs were happening every day. You saw the moon landing, the launch of the first personal computers, the creation of the first cell phone. That period was full of possibility, and that mindset, that belief that anything was possible, was instilled in you and your peers. It's no surprise that you're now trying to push humanity to Mars. You're living out the dreams of a generation that grew up believing the impossible was achievable. Elon shifted in his chair, his mind racing. He had often wondered why he was so driven, why the idea of space exploration was so deeply embedded in his identity. It wasn't just a professional goal, it was a personal mission. A part of him had always felt as though the future of humanity depended on it. Could this be why? Could his obsession with progress, with pushing the boundaries of what's possible, be tied to his generation's worldview? Okay, Musk said, breaking the silence. Let's say you're right. Let's say that my generation was shaped by these forces. But that doesn't explain everything. There's more to success than just being born in the right year, in the right place, at the right time. Lang nodded thoughtfully. True, Elon. There's no denying that personal choice and individual actions play a huge role in shaping a person's life. But there's also something to be said for the environment that forms us. And the reality is, your success, your drive to change the world, is a direct result of the combination of your birth year, your environment, and your relentless work ethic. You wouldn't be the person you are without all of it. Musk was silent, processing Lang's words. The debate within him raged on. Was the theory of birth years the key to understanding his own destiny? Or was it simply another way to explain the success that came from his singular vision and tireless determination? As they wrapped up their conversation, Musk couldn't help but feel a growing sense of unease. Was he being driven by fate, by forces beyond his control? Or was he, as he had always believed, the architect of his own future? The answer, he knew, wasn't so simple. But one thing was clear. This theory, whether he believed in it or not, was starting to affect the way he saw his life. And that, more than anything, made him realize just how powerful the human mind, especially the mind of someone like him, could be when faced with an uncertain future. Elon Musk was no stranger to challenges. From the moment he had founded Zip2, his first tech company, he had been thrust into a world that demanded everything from him, every ounce of energy, every shred of intellect. He was used to pushing the boundaries of what was possible, whether it was creating software that helped newspapers manage their online content or later, taking on the electric car industry with Tesla. The struggles had always been immense, the rewards even greater. But nothing compared to what awaited him as he ventured into the field of space exploration with SpaceX. The year was 2002 when Musk founded SpaceX, with the boldest of dreams in mind. His vision wasn't just about launching rockets into space. It was about making space travel affordable, sustainable, and accessible for everyone. He wanted to make humanity a multiplanetary species, with Mars as the final frontier. At the time, the idea seemed ridiculous. The aerospace industry was dominated by behemoths like NASA and Lockheed Martin, and private companies were a distant afterthought. But Musk wasn't one to listen to critics. In fact, the more people doubted him, the more he was determined to prove them wrong. When SpaceX's first rocket, Falcon 1, failed to reach orbit, it seemed like the company was done. The press hammered him, the naysayers reveled in his failure, and even some of his own employees began to question whether they had been following the right leader. Musk could have walked away. He had the resources, he could have cashed out and lived a life of luxury. But Musk wasn't interested in comfort. He had a mission to fulfill, and that mission was bigger than him. We're going to go to Mars. There's no turning back now, he said, his voice calm but filled with an unshakable confidence. It was in moments like these that Musk's character was revealed, not through his successes, but through his willingness to embrace failure and use it as fuel for his next attempt. He took every setback as a lesson, every mistake as an opportunity to refine his approach. Musk put everything on the line to fund the next launch. In a final bid to keep SpaceX afloat, he poured the last of his money into the next rocket, Falcon 9. If that rocket failed, SpaceX would be no more. It was a terrifying prospect, but Musk was unrelenting. As the rocket ascended into the sky on June 4, 2010, SpaceX and Musk were holding their breath. The world watched as Falcon 9 hit the stage of success, becoming the first privately funded spacecraft to reach orbit. Musk's gamble had paid off. However, as thrilling as that success was, it was only a step toward his ultimate goal. Building rockets wasn't enough. Musk's vision was clear: SpaceX had to revolutionize space travel entirely. Reusability was key, and no one had ever been able to make a rocket that could land and be used again. Critics called him insane, even naive. The technology didn't exist. But to Musk, it was the only way forward. If humanity was ever going to reach Mars, they needed a system that could send rockets into space over and over again without bankrupting everyone involved. He took risks that no one else dared to. In 2015, SpaceX successfully landed the Falcon 9's first stage back on Earth after a launch, a historic achievement that would change the course of space exploration. People around the world were in awe, and Musk stood there, unflinching, watching the result of years of grueling work. For him, it wasn't about glory or fame, it was about proving that something once thought impossible could be achieved. And with every success, his obsession with Mars became clearer. But this was only part of Musk's grand vision. He wasn't just building rockets, he was building a future where humanity could survive beyond Earth. The stakes were higher than ever. With his newfound success in space exploration, Musk turned his focus to Mars, but his mind never strayed too far from his other monumental project, Tesla. He had already proven that electric cars could be a viable alternative to gasoline-powered ones, and now he wanted to push it even further. At Tesla, Musk had started with a goal of revolutionizing the auto industry. It wasn't just about making electric vehicles, it was about rethinking how people viewed energy consumption. The electric car wasn't a novelty. It was the future, and Musk was determined to lead the charge. Despite facing near bankruptcy in the early years, Tesla had now become one of the most valuable companies in the world. But Musk knew that electric vehicles alone wouldn't fix the planet's environmental issues. Tesla needed to expand into energy production, storage, and even solar energy. So, in his typical fashion, he set out to change the way the world thought about renewable energy. In 2016, Tesla acquired SolarCity, the solar power company founded by Musk's cousins, and began pushing the boundaries of energy efficiency with the creation of the Powerwall, a home battery system designed to store solar energy. As with his space ventures, critics had no shortage of negative things to say. Some called it a distraction, others said he was stretching himself too thin. But Musk didn't care about the critics. He wasn't looking to placate anyone, he was solving problems, one ambitious idea at a time. Yet, amidst all these achievements, Musk found himself wrestling with something much more personal: the growing pressures of his life. The responsibilities of managing multiple companies, all at the cutting edge of technology, were weighing on him. His relationship with his employees had been strained at times, and the demands of being a public figure, while simultaneously pursuing one of the most impossible goals in human history, had taken a toll. His personal life was no different. Musk had been through multiple marriages, all of which ended in separation. His focus on work left little room for anything else, and his loneliness, despite the success, became increasingly pronounced. The weight of these challenges seemed to grow heavier as Musk's ambitions soared higher. The pressure to succeed wasn't just about being the first to do something, it was about the pressure to save humanity from itself. In many ways, he felt the future of civilization rested on his shoulders. Mars, electric vehicles, renewable energy, these weren't just business ventures, they were his answer to humanity's survival. And yet, the strain was undeniable. In the midst of all this turmoil, Musk received a message. It was a notification that the final piece of the puzzle had clicked into place: the birth year theory. Despite all the proof, despite everything he had learned, Elon still wasn't convinced that his success had anything to do with when he was born. It was all too coincidental. But it was enough to get him thinking. Could there be some truth to it? One thing was clear, however: Musk was in the middle of something much bigger than himself, a journey that was leading him into uncharted territory. And despite the personal sacrifices, the doubts, and the risks, he was ready to face whatever came next. By now, Elon Musk had experienced every conceivable kind of challenge. He had endured massive failures, extreme personal sacrifices, and an unrelenting barrage of public criticism. Yet, none of that had stopped him. His reputation, despite all the struggles, was cemented as one of the most ambitious and driven entrepreneurs of his time. But it wasn't just about the accolades. It was the mission, the vision for the future, that kept him going. However, as Musk delved deeper into the birth year theory, he began to feel an unfamiliar weight, a mental fog that was hard to shake. Each piece of evidence, each article, each expert opinion began to chip away at the steadfast belief he had always held. That he, and only he, was the master of his fate. For the first time in his life, he began to question the very foundation of his identity. Was it possible that his birth year, 1971, had played a role in shaping his extraordinary path? The theory had started innocently enough, a few online articles and some offhand comments from social media, but now, it had taken on a life of its own. The more Musk read, the more fascinated he became with the idea that people born in 1971 were somehow destined for greatness. It was a theory that claimed those born in this particular year were primed to become changemakers, leaders, and pioneers across industries, with a seemingly disproportionate number of world-altering figures emerging from it. And Musk himself was one of the most glaring examples. For a man who had prided himself on shaping his own destiny, this concept was unsettling. What if everything he had done, the breakthroughs, the milestones, the companies, were all part of some greater cosmic plan? What if it wasn't his sheer genius or tenacity that had driven him to build SpaceX and Tesla, but something that was written into his DNA the moment he was born? The very thought made him feel exposed, vulnerable, like a puppet to forces beyond his control. Despite his reservations, Musk couldn't help but begin to feel a sense of clarity in the theory. Could the success of people born in 1971 truly be tied to the era they were born into? The world was undergoing seismic shifts in the early 70s, political unrest, the aftermath of the moon landing, the rise of computers, and the beginning of a new technological revolution. The social and cultural upheavals of that period, the rapid evolution of technology, and the shifting landscape of global power had all created an environment where only the most innovative minds could thrive. Musk had grown up in the midst of these changes, and the passion for science, technology, and the unknown had been drilled into his very core. It wasn't just about seeking fortune, it was about carving a place in history, about pushing humanity forward. His relentless pursuit of innovation seemed almost fated, as though the stars had aligned in 1971 to produce people who would redefine the world in unimaginable ways. As he continued to research, Musk stumbled upon an old interview with Steve Jobs, another titan born in the same year. In the interview, Jobs had spoken about the incredible sense of urgency he felt throughout his life, how he was driven not only by his ideas but by the belief that he was here to change the world. Musk had always admired Jobs, seeing him as a fellow pioneer, but now, the words felt different. They struck a chord deep within him. Jobs, like Musk, had been part of a generation that was uniquely poised to revolutionize industries. Could it be that they were not just extraordinary individuals but products of a very specific time? But even with all this evidence, even with the nagging voice in his mind that told him there was some truth to the theory, Musk couldn't fully embrace it. He was Elon Musk, after all. He had always believed that the future wasn't something written in the stars but something you created with your own hands. If he was a part of a generation destined for greatness, that greatness had been earned, not handed to him. He reached out to Dr. Robert Lang again, the neuroscientist who had initially introduced him to the theory. The conversation was long and intense, and for the first time, Musk allowed himself to really listen. Lang explained that while individual choices and talents played a large role in shaping one's life, the environment, both social and historical, could not be discounted. The experiences of people born in the early 70s, the advent of the digital age, and the societal changes during that time had contributed to the way they viewed the world and their place within it. They had been born into a time of rapid progress, a time that demanded visionaries who could push the boundaries of what was possible. It's not about fate, Elon, Lang had told him, it's about your environment and your formative experiences. You were born at the cusp of something huge. You and many others who share that birth year are driven not just by ambition but by a deep-seated belief in the possibility of change. But Musk's mind was racing. This wasn't an easy pill to swallow. His entire life had been built on the idea that he was the one pulling the strings, that the universe didn't determine his path, that he did. The thought that something as arbitrary as his birth year might have played a crucial role in his success felt like a betrayal of his own narrative. It was late one night, in the solitude of his office, when the truth finally hit him. He was staring at a star map, planning the next SpaceX mission to Mars, when he realized something profound. Perhaps he didn't have to reject the theory in its entirety. Maybe he could accept that, yes, his birth year played a role, but it was not the defining factor. What truly mattered was how he had taken those circumstances, his environment, the era he was born into, and used them to propel himself forward. In that moment, Musk saw the theory for what it truly was, not a constraint, but a backdrop. It wasn't fate that guided his hand, but the undeniable drive to change the world. The birth year theory didn't define him, it explained him. Musk sat back in his chair, feeling a strange sense of peace wash over him. The weight of his own expectations, the pressure to be the sole creator of his destiny, had lifted. The future was still his to shape. But now, he understood that sometimes, even the most revolutionary minds need to acknowledge the forces at play around them. As he stood up to leave, a thought crossed his mind: maybe it wasn't just about being born in 1971. Maybe it was about what you did with that time, and how you made it your own. The night after his epiphany, Elon Musk sat in his office staring out the window, gazing at the stars beyond. His mind had been racing for days, but in that quiet moment, everything felt clearer. For the first time in a long time, Musk felt at peace with his own narrative. The years of relentless pressure, the tireless pursuit of innovation, the constant drive to be ahead of everyone else, all of it had made sense in a way he had never truly acknowledged before. But now, everything he had worked for seemed to come full circle. The birth year theory that had haunted him, challenged him, and made him question his very identity, had revealed something deeper. It wasn't about fate or chance, it was about the environment, the time, and the people who surrounded him. It was about how he had taken what the world had given him and molded it into something extraordinary. Elon leaned back in his chair, reflecting on his journey. There had been so many times when he felt like giving up. He remembered the early days of Tesla, when the company was on the brink of bankruptcy, and he was pouring every last dollar into the business, praying for a miracle. He recalled the devastating failures at SpaceX, rockets exploding, projects falling behind schedule, and employees questioning whether Musk's lofty ambitions would ever come to fruition. The odds had always been against him, and there were moments when it seemed impossible. Yet, here he was. He had not only built one of the most successful electric vehicle companies in the world but had also made space travel more accessible, bringing humanity one step closer to becoming a multiplanetary species. His companies had revolutionized industries, and his name had become synonymous with innovation. But all of that came at a cost. Musk had lost friendships, endured personal heartbreak, and found himself constantly on the edge of burnout. He had built an empire on the belief that the future would be shaped by people like him, who weren't afraid to take risks, to dream big, to defy convention. But what had he sacrificed along the way? Could he have done things differently? Could he have found more balance between his work and his personal life? These were the questions that plagued him, especially now that he was coming to terms with the realization that perhaps he hadn't been fully in control of everything. He couldn't ignore the way his relationships had suffered. His marriages, his friendships, even his connection to his children, they all seemed secondary to his obsession with pushing the boundaries of what was possible. Musk had always been driven by the idea that his work was bigger than himself. But in the quiet moments, when he wasn't thinking about rockets or electric cars or the future of humanity, the absence of meaningful personal connections hit him like a ton of bricks. Still, Musk couldn't change the past. The man he had become, the person who had dedicated every ounce of his being to changing the world, had been forged in the fire of those sacrifices. The very thing that made him successful, his unrelenting drive, his refusal to accept anything less than greatness, had also been the thing that alienated him from the people closest to him. But now, in this moment of reflection, Musk realized something critical: he didn't have to choose between the two. He didn't have to sacrifice his personal life for his mission, nor did he have to abandon his vision for the future to nurture the relationships that mattered. He could find a way to do both. In fact, that was the key to moving forward. He didn't need to shoulder the weight of the world on his own. He needed a team, people who believed in his vision as much as he did, who could help him carry the load, who could support him through the struggles, just as he had supported them. Musk thought back to the people who had always been there for him, even when things seemed impossible. The engineers at SpaceX, who stayed up late working tirelessly to perfect the rockets. The team at Tesla, who had believed in electric vehicles when no one else did. The employees who had stood by him through the darkest days. These were the people who had helped him build the future, and it was time to start seeing them not just as colleagues, but as the true foundation of his success. As he began to think more deeply about his mission, Musk realized that the future wasn't just about technology or space or electric cars. The future was about collaboration. It was about people coming together to solve the world's most pressing problems, about creating a future that was sustainable, equitable, and powered by innovation. And it wasn't just about him anymore. It was about the collective vision of those around him, the people who believed that change was possible, even when the odds seemed insurmountable. For the first time in years, Musk allowed himself to smile. It wasn't a smile of triumph or victory. It was a smile of understanding. The future was still unwritten, but it no longer felt like he had to carry the weight of it on his shoulders alone. He had learned a valuable lesson: success wasn't just about individual achievement. It was about the people you brought with you on the journey. As the sun began to rise over California, casting a warm glow over his office, Musk made a decision. He would continue to push forward, but he would do so with a new sense of balance. He would be the leader, the visionary, the driving force behind his companies, but he would also be a father, a friend, and someone who knew when to lean on others for support. He picked up his phone and sent a message to his team at SpaceX, telling them to prepare for the next phase of their Mars mission. But this time, he also included a note: "We're in this together. Let's make the impossible happen." As he looked out over the horizon, Musk felt a renewed sense of purpose. The future still had its uncertainties, but he knew one thing for sure: whatever came next, he wouldn't face it alone. And that, in itself, was a revelation. The decision to embrace a more balanced life was a monumental shift for Elon Musk. For so long, his life had been defined by the pursuit of the next big thing, the next frontier to conquer. But now, as he tried to incorporate more reflection and understanding into his daily routine, he began to feel the weight of his choices. It wasn't easy to change course, especially when the momentum of his ambitions had always been about going faster, doing more, and never stopping. Within weeks of his revelation, things began to shift at SpaceX and Tesla. There was a new energy in the air, a sense that the people around him felt more connected to the mission. Musk noticed that his team seemed reinvigorated, more collaborative, and more creative. Ideas flowed more freely, and the culture that had often been one of relentless pressure was now tempered with a sense of purpose and community. People were starting to feel like they weren't just working for him, they were working with him. But despite this newfound sense of unity, Musk knew he wasn't out of the woods yet. His companies were still navigating a landscape of fierce competition, political pressure, and constant scrutiny. Investors were restless, always looking for the next breakthrough, the next promise of something world-changing. And with the Mars mission looming ever closer, the stakes were higher than ever. SpaceX's goal was audacious, to say the least: to build a fully reusable rocket capable of carrying humans to Mars. Musk had already made history with the first privately funded spacecraft to reach orbit, but getting people to the Red Planet was an entirely different beast. Every failure was scrutinized, and with every rocket launch, the world was watching. The pressure to succeed was immense, but this time, Musk felt different. He was still driven, still pushing for innovation at every turn, but he was more mindful of the toll it was taking on those around him. As SpaceX prepared for its next critical launch, something unexpected happened. One of the key engineers, Lucas, came to Musk with a concern. Lucas was a brilliant mind, known for his attention to detail and his cautious approach to risk. He had been working with Musk for nearly a decade, and the two had developed a strong working relationship. But this time, Lucas was hesitant. "I don't know if we're ready," Lucas said, his voice tense. "I know we've made progress, but this next launch, there are too many unknowns. Too many things could go wrong." Musk was taken aback. He had always prided himself on his ability to inspire confidence, to push through fear and uncertainty. But Lucas was right, there were risks. The mission to Mars wasn't just about technology, it was about human lives. The pressure of making the mission a reality had always weighed heavily on Musk, but hearing Lucas's concerns hit harder than expected. For the first time, Musk felt doubt creeping in. He knew the risks, of course. But the thought of pulling back now, after so many years of progress, was terrifying. Could he afford to fail? Could he afford to disappoint not only his team but the millions of people who believed in his vision? "What do you think we should do?" Musk asked, his voice quieter than usual. Lucas hesitated before speaking again. "I think we need to recalibrate. We need to take a step back, address the weaknesses, and make sure we're fully prepared. Rushing ahead could cost us everything." It was a hard pill to swallow, but Musk knew Lucas was right. The tension that had been building in him ever since his decision to balance his life and his work was now bubbling to the surface. The conflict between pushing forward relentlessly and taking the time to ensure everything was right was reaching a breaking point. Musk had always believed in moving fast, in breaking barriers, in forging ahead no matter what the cost. But Lucas's words reminded him of something he'd learned earlier: progress was only valuable if it was sustainable. After a long night of reflection, Musk decided to make an unprecedented move. He called for a company-wide meeting at SpaceX. He wasn't sure what he expected from the conversation, but he knew it was time for a change. The world didn't need another risky launch or a failed mission. It needed results, and it needed them in a way that didn't come at the cost of people's lives or the well-being of the team. At the meeting, Musk stood in front of his engineers, designers, and technicians, all of whom were waiting for his direction. He could feel the tension in the room, everyone knew what was at stake, and they all respected the man who had led them this far. But Musk wasn't the same leader he had been when he first started SpaceX. The weight of his experiences had changed him. The pressure of success had become more than just a challenge, it had become a responsibility. "We've made incredible progress," Musk began, his voice calm but firm. "But we have a choice to make. We can continue at full speed ahead, taking risks and pushing boundaries, or we can slow down just enough to make sure we're doing this right. We've come so far. Let's not jeopardize everything we've worked for by rushing into something that might not be ready." The room was silent. For a moment, Musk thought they might rebel. They were all innovators, after all. They were used to Musk's relentless ambition, his demand for perfection. But then, one by one, people began to nod. The tension that had been thick in the air seemed to dissipate as they all realized the gravity of Musk's words. He wasn't asking them to slow down permanently, he was asking them to be smart about it. "We're going to take the time we need," Musk continued. "We're going to make sure that the next launch isn't just a launch, it's the launch. A success, not just for SpaceX, but for humanity. And I promise you, we will get there. But we're going to get there the right way." For the first time in a long time, Musk saw something in his team that he hadn't seen before: belief. They believed in him, but more importantly, they believed in each other. The new direction wasn't about Musk driving them forward, it was about them working together as a collective to make something extraordinary happen. As the meeting concluded, Musk felt a sense of relief he hadn't experienced in years. The conflict that had been brewing inside him had been resolved, not by pushing forward blindly, but by listening, by pausing, and by realizing that sometimes the greatest breakthroughs come from thoughtful consideration. He was ready to move forward, just not at the pace he had once imagined. And that, Musk realized, was the most significant lesson of all. The weeks that followed Musk's decision to recalibrate the mission felt like a strange balance between relief and tension. SpaceX and Tesla were moving forward at a slower pace, but the people around him seemed more cohesive, more united. For the first time, Musk didn't feel like the lone visionary who carried the world's weight on his shoulders. Yet, as much as the changes were positive, they also came with a new set of challenges. In the midst of these developments, another unexpected problem emerged. A critical issue had arisen at Tesla, one that threatened to unravel some of the progress the company had made. The Tesla Model S, the flagship of Musk's electric car empire, was facing a series of glitches that could potentially damage the company's reputation. It wasn't just about a few minor software errors. These glitches could impact the safety of the vehicle, and that was something Musk couldn't allow to happen. The pressure that had been building around him suddenly intensified, and it was all he could do to keep his head above water. One evening, after yet another long day of meetings and troubleshooting, Musk sat alone in his office, the lights dimmed low. His mind raced with the weight of what had happened. He had been so focused on SpaceX, on the larger mission to Mars, that he had overlooked some of the issues at Tesla. Now, his companies were at a crossroads. It wasn't just about building the future, it was about protecting what he had already created. In the quiet of his office, Musk could feel the pull of his old instincts, his desire to push through the crisis with sheer force of will. But he was different now. He had learned, through the conversations with his team and his personal reflections, that there was another way forward. The same approach he had taken in the early years of Tesla, forcing through obstacles without regard for personal sacrifice, wasn't sustainable anymore. Still, the frustration lingered. How could he let this happen? Tesla's success had been hard-earned, and to see it threatened now, in the very moment when things seemed to be aligning with SpaceX's plans, felt like a crushing blow. Musk had always thrived under pressure, but now, that pressure was beginning to suffocate him. His vision for the future, for a sustainable world powered by electric vehicles, felt fragile. The thought that it could all collapse, that Tesla could fail just when it was on the brink of becoming mainstream, sent waves of anxiety through his chest. It wasn't just the company's future that weighed heavily on his mind. It was the people who depended on him. His children, his friends, and the team that had followed him through every trial and triumph, they were all part of this equation. Musk had always believed that the world needed his ideas, needed the advancements he was creating. But now, he was beginning to see the importance of the human element. The people who worked with him, who put their trust in him, were more than just colleagues, they were his support system. This understanding hit him harder than he expected. He had always believed that sacrifice was the price of greatness, that the world's problems wouldn't solve themselves unless someone was willing to pay the price. But now, the weight of those sacrifices was starting to take its toll on him, both emotionally and physically. He had pushed so hard for so long that he had neglected the very relationships that made his work meaningful in the first place. That night, Musk's thoughts turned inward, something he hadn't allowed himself to do in a long time. He thought about his ex-wives, his strained relationship with his children, and the friends who had distanced themselves from him over the years. It wasn't just about business anymore. It was about finding balance, about reconnecting with the people he had lost along the way. But how? How could he rebuild those connections while continuing to push the boundaries of innovation? The thought seemed overwhelming. He couldn't just flip a switch and suddenly be the perfect father, the perfect friend, the perfect leader. But he knew one thing for sure, he couldn't continue down this path of relentless isolation. The next morning, he called a meeting with his leadership team at Tesla. This time, he didn't come with solutions, with ideas for how to fix the glitches. Instead, he came with something that felt like a step into the unknown: vulnerability. "I've been thinking a lot about our mission, about Tesla, about where we're headed," Musk started, his voice quieter than usual. And I've realized something important. I've spent so much of my life focused on the big picture, the grand vision of changing the world, that I've ignored some of the smaller, but equally important, aspects. Like taking care of the people who make all of this possible. The room was silent. His leadership team exchanged glances, unsure of how to respond to this unfamiliar side of their usually commanding leader. Musk could see the confusion, but he also saw something else, a flicker of understanding, perhaps even relief. "I've neglected the importance of balance," Musk continued, his voice growing steadier as he spoke. "I've pushed us all so hard, but I haven't taken the time to listen, to ensure that everyone here is supported, not just in terms of the work we're doing, but in terms of who we are as people. That changes today." The message was clear. Musk wasn't just concerned with the product anymore. He was concerned with the people behind it, the human beings who made Tesla and SpaceX possible. This was a turning point, a realization that success wasn't just about reaching new heights in technology, it was about taking care of the foundation that supported it. The weeks that followed were marked by a shift in culture. Musk began to spend more time listening to his teams, to his friends, and most importantly, to himself. He still pushed for progress, for the world-changing innovations that had driven him for so many years. But now, he did so with a renewed sense of humility and a deeper understanding of what truly mattered. The emotional weight of the last few weeks didn't disappear overnight, but Musk could feel the strain start to loosen. The balance he had been seeking wasn't an easy thing to achieve, but for the first time in his career, he felt like he was on the path to something sustainable. Not just for his companies, but for himself. And as he sat in his office one evening, watching the sunset over California, Musk realized that the true test of a visionary wasn't in the number of projects they launched or the heights they reached. It was in their ability to adapt, to learn from their mistakes, and to create something that would last, not just in technology, but in the hearts and minds of the people they touched. The months that followed Musk's decision to recalibrate, to focus more on balance and emotional well-being, were a journey of unexpected victories. He had no idea that the process of rebuilding his relationships and reevaluating his approach to leadership would not only help heal his personal life but also lead to some of the greatest breakthroughs his companies had ever seen. SpaceX was working on its next rocket launch, one that would take them one step closer to Mars. Musk had learned to embrace a slower pace, but the mission's urgency remained. The company's reputation hung in the balance. The technology was still cutting edge, but the stakes had never been higher. Every time they attempted to launch, the risks seemed more real, more imminent. The first test flight after Musk's internal shift was not as simple as pushing a button and hoping for the best. There had been several engineering setbacks, but with a more unified and empowered team, SpaceX was able to make the necessary adjustments. What was different this time was the sense of unity that permeated the entire company. It wasn't just about pushing past limitations, it was about being deliberate, about collaborating deeply, and listening to the concerns and insights of every individual on the team. And then, the launch day arrived. Musk stood by the command center, nervously watching the team as they executed the final preparations. It was strange, he had been through hundreds of launches, but this time, it felt different. He wasn't just focused on the technology, he was thinking about the people in the room, the families of the engineers, the investors, the people who believed in him. There was an underlying sense of responsibility that he had never felt before. The rocket, the Falcon 9, was ready for liftoff. The countdown began, and Musk felt his heart race. At 0, the rocket shot into the sky, the bright trail of fire and smoke lighting up the early morning sky. The entire room erupted in applause. There was no greater feeling for Musk than witnessing this moment, a moment that was not just a personal achievement, but a collective one. It was a victory born not only from technology but from the support and trust of his team. And then came the second stage. The reusability test. Reusing a rocket had never been done before, and it was one of the most ambitious parts of SpaceX's mission. Musk had dreamed of a fully reusable rocket for years, something that would revolutionize space travel and make missions to Mars a tangible reality. This test was crucial, if it succeeded, it would change everything. The rocket landed safely on a drone ship in the middle of the ocean. Musk stood frozen for a moment, processing what had just happened. It wasn't just a technological achievement. It was a testament to what could be achieved when a group of dedicated, passionate people work together with purpose, without sacrificing their humanity. As the cheers around him rang out, Musk felt a wave of gratitude. He realized that all the moments of doubt, the struggles, the difficult decisions, it was all worth it. This success wasn't just his own. It was a victory for everyone who had supported him along the way, from his engineers to his family, his friends, and even the public who had followed his journey. Back at Tesla, things were looking up as well. The Model S glitches had been resolved, and production was back on track. The cars were now rolling off the assembly lines at a pace that had once seemed impossible. The same principles that had applied to SpaceX, patience, collaboration, and thoughtful decision-making, were starting to show results in Tesla's operations as well. But even as things appeared to be heading in the right direction, Musk couldn't shake the nagging feeling that he hadn't fully reconciled his personal life. He had made significant strides at work, but what about at home? His relationship with his children, his ex-wives, these were the parts of his life that had been neglected for too long. He couldn't ignore them any longer. Musk had always put his work first, but now, he was starting to see that family was not a secondary part of his life, it was essential to his sense of fulfillment. That's when he made the decision to take a step back, just a small one. He planned a family weekend. A weekend where he could put the work aside and focus on being present with his children. It wasn't easy, and he struggled to disconnect from the constant pull of his companies, but he knew that if he didn't start to rebuild these relationships, he would never find true peace. The weekend was simple. Musk and his children went on hikes, played board games, and spent hours talking and laughing. It wasn't perfect, there were still moments of awkwardness, and old wounds that hadn't quite healed, but there was progress. Musk felt something he hadn't felt in years, a sense of belonging, of being grounded in something more than just his work. By the end of the weekend, Musk realized something that surprised him. He didn't need to be constantly moving forward at full speed. He didn't need to be the perfect entrepreneur, the perfect visionary, or the perfect father all the time. What he needed was balance, and more importantly, the ability to accept that imperfection was a part of life. The road to Mars, to Tesla's future, to everything he had dreamed of, was still ahead of him. But now, Musk was moving forward not just as an entrepreneur, but as a father, a friend, and a leader who understood that the greatest victories didn't come from technological breakthroughs alone, they came from the relationships and experiences that anchored him to the world. As Musk sat at the dinner table with his children that evening, he realized that this, right here, was what truly mattered. The future was bright, but it was the people in his life, his team, his family, his friends, that would make that future worth living. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The whirlwind of progress had reached its peak, but Musk's journey wasn't over. After the successful launches, the restored momentum at Tesla, and his gradual reconnection with his family, Musk found himself at a crossroads. It was clear that everything he had done, the highs, the lows, the battles, had led him to a deeper understanding of his purpose. But where did that leave him now? Could he continue to build on his legacy without sacrificing the very things he had learned to cherish? As the months passed, Musk began to shift his focus even more on what truly mattered, not just the future of humanity, but the people he shared it with. SpaceX's mission to Mars remained the driving force behind his life's work, but now, it was accompanied by a new sense of responsibility, one that transcended technology. He began to hold regular, town hall meetings at SpaceX and Tesla, where employees could speak directly to him. There were no big announcements, no new product reveals, just honest conversations. Musk realized that his leadership had often been top-down, his presence commanding and distant. But now, he wanted to listen. He wanted to hear the stories of those who had worked alongside him, the unsung heroes who built the rockets, designed the cars, and pushed the boundaries of possibility. During one such meeting, an engineer named Elena spoke up. She was a quiet woman, often sitting in the back during the company's larger presentations, but there was something about her voice that carried weight. She shared a story about the early days at SpaceX, how she had joined the company when it was still a small startup, and how Musk's vision had inspired her to leave a stable job and take a risk. But what stuck out in her story was not just the challenges they had faced, but the sense of purpose they had felt when working together. "Elon, you've always pushed us to think bigger," she said, her voice steady but emotional. "But now, I see something different. You're showing us that it's not just about getting to Mars or creating the best electric car. It's about taking care of the people who make it all possible." Musk sat quietly, absorbing her words. Elena wasn't the first person to say something like this, but hearing it from one of the engineers, the very people who had risked their careers for his dreams, struck him in a way that nothing had before. "I've been thinking a lot about that," Musk replied, his voice softer than usual. "I've always believed that progress came from sacrifice, from pushing beyond what was possible. But lately, I've realized that we can't sacrifice the people who make this possible. We need to grow together, not just as a company, but as a community." The room was silent for a moment, the weight of Musk's words settling in. It was a revelation, a breakthrough not just in terms of business, but in how Musk saw the world. He had always prided himself on his ability to push beyond limits, to achieve the impossible. But now, he understood that true greatness wasn't just about achieving milestones, it was about the journey, the relationships, and the human connections that made that journey meaningful. Later that week, Musk took a step that would have been unthinkable a year ago. He organized a company-wide retreat for both Tesla and SpaceX. It was not just about team building or problem solving, it was about acknowledging the human aspect of their shared work. The retreat was set in a remote location, far from the pressures of Silicon Valley, and it provided the employees an opportunity to disconnect from their daily grind and reflect on the bigger picture. Musk attended the retreat, but he wasn't the center of attention. He participated in the discussions, shared his thoughts, but more importantly, he listened. It was there that he realized how much he had changed over the past year. The old Musk, the driven, single-minded entrepreneur, was still present in many ways, but there was a new Musk too, one who understood that the human aspect of his mission was as important as the technological one. The retreat didn't solve every problem. Tesla and SpaceX still faced challenges, and the pressure to deliver on their ambitious goals was never far from Musk's mind. But something fundamental had shifted. The teams felt stronger, more cohesive. There was a new sense of purpose, not just in the work they did, but in how they worked together. Musk's relationships with his family had also continued to evolve. His children had grown older, and while there were still difficult moments, they were learning to understand the complexities of his work. He wasn't the perfect father, but he was present, and that, in itself, was a victory. He learned that being a father didn't require perfection, it required consistency, patience, and a willingness to be there, even when the world seemed to demand more. As he reflected on his journey, Musk realized that his success had never been about one single achievement, it had been about the continuous effort to improve, to push forward, and to create something lasting. He had spent years chasing a future for humanity, but in doing so, he had built a life and a community that mattered just as much. The true test of his legacy wouldn't be in the rockets he launched or the cars he built, but in the lives he touched along the way. One evening, as he stood looking out at the horizon from his home, Musk felt a deep sense of peace. He wasn't done yet. The mission to Mars was still the ultimate goal, but it had become clear that the journey wasn't just about reaching a destination. It was about the path he walked, the people he walked it with, and the lessons he had learned along the way. Life has a way of surprising you, Musk thought, a smile tugging at the corner of his lips. But it's the people who surprise you the most. And that, in the end, is what makes it all worthwhile. The months following the retreat marked a new era for Musk and his companies. While the world continued to watch SpaceX and Tesla with bated breath, Musk found himself increasingly preoccupied with his legacy, not just the incredible technological feats he had orchestrated, but the lasting impact of those innovations on the world and its people. As SpaceX's Mars mission moved forward, Musk knew that his personal story, his vision, would soon be intertwined with the future of humanity. But he also understood something more profound: the price of ambition had been steep, and he had paid it with more than just sweat and tears. He had sacrificed relationships, peace of mind, and even his own well-being in the pursuit of a dream. But through everything, the endless hours, the battles with failure, the personal losses, he had come to realize that it wasn't just the monumental success that mattered. It was the people who shared in those victories and losses that defined the true value of his journey. A pivotal moment came unexpectedly. One afternoon, while Musk was visiting a new Tesla facility in Shanghai, he received a call from his assistant, informing him that a key engineer, someone he had worked closely with for years, was leaving the company. The engineer, David, had played a critical role in the development of the Falcon 9 and had been instrumental in the recent breakthroughs at SpaceX. The news hit Musk hard. David had been more than just an employee, he had been a trusted partner, a visionary in his own right. But David had made the decision to leave, to take a break from the high-pressure life that came with working at SpaceX and Tesla. In a way, Musk understood. The relentless pace, the constant push for innovation, had a way of eating away at the soul. But that didn't make the loss any easier to bear. Musk had always seen the team as an extension of himself, his dream, his vision, materialized through the efforts of everyone who had joined him on the journey. Losing David felt like a personal failure, a reminder that the very forces of ambition he had embraced could sometimes be too much to handle. Musk called David, expecting to hear a final, definitive goodbye, but instead, David's voice was calm, even philosophical. "Elon," he said, "I'm not leaving because I don't believe in what we're doing here. I'm leaving because I've seen the incredible impact this company has had, and I need to step back for a bit. We all do. We need to remember that there's more to life than the mission. We all need balance. You've taught me that." Musk was struck by the clarity of David's words. The engineer, the man who had been with him through so many challenges, was telling him something that Musk had heard from others but never fully internalized: balance. Musk had thought that by achieving the impossible, he could somehow escape the toll that it took on his personal life. But now, the weight of it all, his past mistakes, his past sacrifices, began to feel heavier than ever. The conversation with David stayed with Musk as he returned to California, and he spent several days reflecting on the profound impact that balance, humanity, and relationships had on the trajectory of his success. He began to shift his focus, not just on the massive, outward-facing goals of Mars or the electric vehicle revolution, but on what those goals represented on a deeper, more personal level. As he drove back to his home, the sun setting behind the hills of California, Musk realized that his legacy wasn't just about building rockets or creating electric cars. It was about what those innovations would enable for the future. Space travel, renewable energy, artificial intelligence, these were the stepping stones to an entirely new world, but the true legacy was what the world did with those tools. Would humanity rise to the occasion? Would it be worthy of the advancements Musk and his teams had fought for? In that moment, the emotional weight of everything Musk had experienced came crashing down on him. The late nights, the strained relationships, the constant pressure, it all made sense in a new light. Everything had led him to this point, where the future was no longer just a dream but a tangible possibility. Yet, it wasn't just about reaching new heights, it was about ensuring that humanity, in all its complexity, was ready to face those heights. Musk called a meeting with his inner circle, those who had supported him the longest, and together they began discussing the next phase of their journey, not just in business, but in life. It was time to focus on the sustainability of their work, both in terms of technological innovation and in terms of the people who had been a part of it. They needed to ensure that the successes didn't come at the expense of the relationships that made those successes meaningful. "What do we do now?" one of his top engineers asked, voicing a question that had been lingering in the air for weeks. Musk's response was simple, yet profound: "We build a world worth living in." Not just a future we can reach, but one that we want to live in. As he sat with his team, talking through the potential of future projects that were still in their infancy, Musk realized that he was no longer leading just a tech company or an aerospace company, he was guiding a movement. The principles that had driven him to this point, the drive for sustainability, for a better future for humanity, were just as applicable to his personal life as they were to his work. Musk's vision had always been about the impossible. But now, the impossible didn't just refer to landing on Mars or making electric vehicles mainstream, it referred to creating a world where the values of empathy, balance, and collaboration were as central as the quest for technological innovation. The night fell as Musk sat on the balcony of his home, overlooking the sprawling city below. It was a beautiful moment, one he hadn't allowed himself to savor in years. And for the first time in a long time, he wasn't thinking about the next big project, the next step in humanity's journey to the stars. He was thinking about something simpler, the people in his life, the relationships that truly mattered. With a sense of peace he had never known before, Musk whispered to himself, "This is just the beginning." The weeks following Musk's realization were filled with a quiet yet profound transformation. He had learned that, while ambition and innovation could drive humanity to incredible heights, it was balance and self-awareness that allowed individuals to thrive along the way. He was no longer the relentless, obsessive leader who pushed himself and others to the brink. Instead, Musk found himself embracing a gentler, more thoughtful approach to both work and life. He made time for his children more consistently, no longer seeing his personal life as something that could be postponed indefinitely for the sake of his companies. On weekends, he took them to local parks, attended their school events, and even found himself involved in simple activities he had once dismissed as mundane. But it was these moments, these quiet, intimate exchanges, that gave him the clarity he needed to continue his mission with renewed energy. At Tesla, Musk began holding regular meetings with his employees not just to discuss the company's progress but to check in on their well-being. It wasn't about maximizing efficiency anymore, it was about fostering an environment where people felt valued, not just as employees but as individuals. These meetings were different from the ones before, they were real, raw, and human. They often started with casual conversations about life, hobbies, or even challenges that had nothing to do with Tesla's day-to-day operations. These exchanges revealed a side of Musk his employees had never seen before, a person who was vulnerable, open, and committed to their growth. One afternoon, during one of these meetings, a young engineer named Sarah asked Musk a question that took him by surprise. "Elon," she said tentatively, "you've talked a lot about your mission to make the world a better place. But how do you define that for yourself, personally? What does better look like to you?" Musk was quiet for a moment, the weight of her question settling on him. It was a question that, up until that point, he hadn't fully explored himself. Sure, he had his grand ambitions, his desire to save humanity from the brink of disaster, his goal of creating a sustainable future for all, but what did that look like for him on a personal level? "I guess," Musk began, "I used to think that better meant achieving the impossible, getting to Mars, creating cars that could change the world, revolutionizing energy. But now, I realize that better doesn't just mean changing the world on a grand scale. It's also about the small things, the people we help, the relationships we nurture, the lives we touch along the way. It's about creating a life where everyone has the opportunity to thrive. We can't build a better world unless we build a better way of living together." Musk's words hung in the air, and Sarah smiled, clearly appreciative of the honesty in his response. It was a small but significant moment in the evolution of the company's culture. For the first time, Musk had publicly acknowledged that personal fulfillment and human connection were just as important as the groundbreaking technologies they were creating. The shift in his approach soon began to affect Tesla and SpaceX in ways Musk hadn't anticipated. Employees felt more motivated, more aligned with the company's mission. They no longer saw themselves as just cogs in a machine, they were collaborators in a shared vision, one that encompassed both professional and personal growth. The result was an increase in creativity, innovation, and a renewed sense of purpose. Meanwhile, SpaceX's Mars mission continued to make progress. Musk, now more open to listening to his team, found himself learning from the very engineers and astronauts he had once viewed as his subordinates. Together, they reimagined what it would take to make a sustainable human presence on Mars. Not just in terms of technology but in terms of community, culture, and emotional well-being. Musk had always been focused on the technical aspects of the mission, but now, he began to think more deeply about what it would mean to create a new world, where the same mistakes of the past could be avoided, and where human beings could truly thrive. Back at Tesla, the company was on the verge of its next major milestone. The Model 3, which had faced so many setbacks and delays in the past, was now nearing mass production. The challenges had been immense, but Musk felt a sense of pride in the way the team had handled it all. They hadn't just built a car, they had built a culture, one that encouraged problem-solving, resilience, and, most importantly, empathy. But even as he celebrated these wins, Musk knew that there was still much work to be done. There was still the daunting challenge of leading humanity into space, of making Earth a sustainable place, and of creating a future that was just and equitable for all. The stakes were higher than ever, but Musk no longer felt the pressure to achieve everything alone. He knew now that it was about collaboration, not just with his teams but with the world at large. In the evenings, as Musk sat on his balcony looking at the stars, something he hadn't done with true contemplation in years, he thought about the path ahead. The ambition was still there, the drive to change the world, to make it a better place, but it was now tempered by a deep appreciation for the journey itself. His children played in the yard, their laughter drifting on the evening air, and Musk realized that the greatest gift he could give them wasn't just a world of innovation and technology. It was a world of compassion, balance, and opportunity. The journey to Mars was important, but the legacy of what they would create here on Earth mattered just as much. And with that realization, Musk understood something else: the pursuit of greatness didn't have to be a solitary one. It was about building something together. It was about creating a future where humanity, not just technology, would flourish. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, Elon Musk was at peace with that uncertainty. He didn't need to have all the answers. What mattered now was the question, and the people he would share the answers with. The months following Musk's personal revelations began to change not just his company's, but the very nature of the world he had spent so long trying to shape. His shift toward balance and deeper human connections reverberated through Tesla and SpaceX, igniting a wave of innovation that extended beyond technology. Now, Musk found himself grappling with something far more profound: how could he ensure that the changes he was fostering within his companies could ripple outward into the world at large? At the core of his transformation was the realization that no company, no matter how successful, could thrive in isolation. Musk had built SpaceX to push the boundaries of space exploration, and Tesla to revolutionize the automotive industry, but both companies had always been grounded in the belief that technology could create a more sustainable and equitable world. Yet, as he focused more on the human aspect of his work, he realized that the world's problems couldn't be solved by technology alone. They needed a collective effort, a global movement that extended beyond his companies and encompassed all of humanity. Musk decided to take the next step. He would launch a global initiative focused on sustainability and social good, an initiative that would bring together people from all walks of life, all industries, to collaborate on building a better future. It was time to push beyond the boundaries of what he had already created. He knew that innovation in technology had to be accompanied by innovation in human relationships, community building, and social responsibility. He called together a meeting with leaders from Tesla, SpaceX, and several other companies within his orbit. These leaders were visionaries, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders who shared Musk's passion for technology and progress. The goal of this meeting was to initiate a movement, a global effort to align industry, society, and government in a concerted push toward a more sustainable and equitable world. As the meeting began, Musk stood before the room, his voice calm but filled with conviction. "We've been doing things differently," he said. "But we've been doing them within our own bubbles, Tesla, SpaceX, and all of the companies we've created. It's time to open the doors. The world needs what we've learned, and we need to learn from the world." Musk outlined his vision for a global initiative, where companies, governments, and citizens could collaborate on groundbreaking solutions to some of the world's most pressing issues: climate change, inequality, and access to technology. It wasn't enough to create groundbreaking technology if the people who needed it most were excluded from its benefits. Musk was calling for a paradigm shift, a world where collaboration, sustainability, and social good were as essential as the products and innovations that drove economic growth. There was a moment of silence in the room as his words sank in. The challenge ahead was monumental. Many of the people in the room had spent years pushing the limits of what was possible within their industries. The idea of opening their doors to collaboration with others, especially competitors, was daunting. But Musk's impassioned speech had struck a chord. They understood that the stakes were higher than ever. The world was facing unprecedented challenges, and it was no longer enough to simply innovate within the walls of their companies. It was time to break down the barriers. In the weeks that followed, Musk's initiative began to take shape. He held roundtable discussions with leaders in various sectors, including energy, technology, healthcare, and education. The goal was to break down the silos that had long divided industries and governments, fostering a new model of collaboration that would tackle the interconnected issues of climate change, economic disparity, and access to resources. But even as the initiative gained momentum, Musk was forced to confront the enormity of the challenge. The road to a more sustainable and equitable world was fraught with obstacles. Governments were slow to respond. Businesses were hesitant to abandon their traditional competitive mindsets. And, as with any movement of this magnitude, there were those who resisted change, who were more interested in preserving the status quo than in embracing a new way of thinking. Musk's frustration began to grow as he encountered resistance at every turn. But as he faced these challenges, he found that his approach had changed. No longer was he the lone wolf pushing forward at all costs. He was now part of a collective effort, a movement. The power of the group, the collaboration, was becoming evident, and it was in these moments of tension and challenge that Musk felt his own growth. He was no longer simply a disruptor, he was a leader in a global transformation. Then, the first major breakthrough occurred. A partnership with governments around the world was secured for a large-scale project focused on renewable energy. The goal was to build an interconnected grid that would deliver sustainable power across multiple countries, reducing reliance on fossil fuels and addressing energy poverty. The project was ambitious, far beyond anything Musk had ever attempted, but it was a step toward realizing his vision of a world where innovation was shared for the greater good. It was a huge victory for Musk's global initiative, but the road ahead remained uncertain. The success of the renewable energy project required the support of millions of people, and it needed the cooperation of governments, businesses, and everyday citizens. The challenge, Musk realized, was no longer about making the impossible possible, it was about creating a new mindset, one that placed collective well-being above individual gain. Months later, as the project began to take shape, Musk found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought him here. He had started with a dream of revolutionizing space travel, then expanded that dream to include sustainable energy, electric vehicles, and artificial intelligence. But now, he saw that his legacy would not be defined by the technologies he had created, but by the movement he had helped to lead. It was a movement that had brought together people from every corner of the globe, united in the belief that humanity's greatest challenges could only be solved through collaboration, compassion, and shared innovation. As he watched the sun set over the SpaceX campus, Musk felt a sense of fulfillment unlike anything he had ever known. There were still hurdles to overcome, still battles to fight, but for the first time, the future seemed bright. Not because of the technologies they had built, but because of the people who were working together to create something better. The ripple effect had begun. And in that moment, Musk knew that he was no longer just a man with a mission. He was a part of something much bigger, something that would echo through the world for generations to come. The global initiative Musk had spearheaded was slowly but surely beginning to take root. The partnership between governments, businesses, and global leaders was starting to show promise. However, the pressure of guiding such a monumental project began to weigh heavily on Musk. As much as he had embraced the idea of collaboration, he couldn't help but feel the weight of his legacy pressing down on him. Every decision he made, every strategic move, was scrutinized. What he was attempting was nothing short of audacious. He was trying to change the way the entire world operated, not just with technology, but with the very way people viewed cooperation, competition, and progress. The stakes were so high that every setback, every small failure, felt like a personal failure. The project was so much bigger than his individual companies now. It felt as if he was trying to guide the entire planet toward a more sustainable future, a future that might not be achieved if he didn't succeed. One particularly difficult day, as Musk sat in his office surrounded by blueprints and mission reports, he was hit with a wave of doubt. There had been another delay with the renewable energy project. The grid infrastructure that was supposed to link multiple countries had faced numerous technical setbacks, and the political negotiations were becoming more complicated. Countries were pulling back on their commitments, citing internal issues and shifting priorities. There were protests from communities that felt left out of the technological revolution. There were whispers that the initiative was too ambitious, too fast, and that it might be doomed to fail. Musk felt a pang in his chest. He'd faced obstacles before, he'd been laughed at, dismissed, underestimated, but this felt different. The weight of not just his companies but the hopes of millions of people now rested on his shoulders. There was no room for failure. If this failed, everything would collapse. He stood up, pacing the room, his mind racing. It wasn't just the business aspect that troubled him. It was the personal toll, the feeling that he was sacrificing the most important relationships in his life for a dream that might not be realized. His children were growing up without him, and though they loved him, they were learning to live without his presence. His friendships, too, had been strained by his intense focus on work. The idea of leaving behind a legacy was beginning to feel like a cruel joke. If he succeeded, would it even matter if he didn't have anyone to share it with? He picked up his phone and dialed an old friend, someone who had seen him through his darkest moments. It rang a few times before the voice on the other end answered. "Elon," the voice said, surprised but warm. It was Jeff, a longtime confidant from his early days at PayPal. "Jeff, I don't know if I can keep doing this," Musk said, his voice breaking as the words tumbled out. "I've been trying to change the world, to build something that would last, but I feel like I'm losing everything in the process. My family, my health, my peace of mind. I feel like I'm about to crack under the pressure." There was a brief pause before Jeff spoke. "Elon, I get it," Jeff said gently. "The pressure you're under is unimaginable. But you have to remember, change doesn't happen overnight. And no one can carry the weight of the world on their own. You've already done something incredible by bringing people together. You've changed the way people think. But you don't have to do it all yourself. There's a reason you've been so successful, because you've surrounded yourself with brilliant people. You've built a team. Let them help you now." Musk let Jeff's words sink in. It wasn't that he didn't know he had a team. It was that he had grown so used to being the one who drove the vision, the one who set the course, that he had lost sight of the fact that real change required collective effort. He wasn't in this alone, and maybe, just maybe, that was the key to making it all work. After a long conversation, Musk hung up, feeling slightly lighter, though still burdened. He knew Jeff was right. The success of the initiative couldn't hinge solely on him, it had to be about the people around him. The scientists, the engineers, the policymakers, and, most importantly, the communities that would benefit from these changes. It was time to truly trust in the collective power of the team. A few days later, Musk invited the leaders of the global initiative to a special summit. It was a pivotal moment, a chance to regroup, refocus, and remind everyone why they had embarked on this journey in the first place. The mood in the room was somber at first, with many feeling the weight of the recent setbacks. But as Musk spoke, something shifted. We've all been facing immense challenges, he began, his voice steady but filled with conviction. But we're not just solving problems, we're creating something that will shape the future of humanity. This isn't about technology. It's about the people. It's about the families that will benefit from the energy we produce. It's about the children we're leaving behind a better world for. It's about making sure that every person, no matter where they come from, has access to the opportunity to thrive. That's why we started this. And that's why we have to keep going. Musk's words resonated deeply with everyone in the room. Slowly, the mood shifted. They weren't just solving a series of technical problems, they were part of a movement, part of something that had the potential to redefine how humanity approached its greatest challenges. Musk had reignited the fire in them, and with renewed energy, they dove back into their work. Weeks passed, and the momentum of the project picked up again. Governments rejoined the initiative, bolstered by Musk's message of unity and shared purpose. The technical setbacks were addressed with the combined efforts of experts from around the world, and the renewable energy grid was finally on track for its initial deployment. Musk, for the first time in months, allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection. The pressure hadn't gone away, but he no longer felt like it was his burden alone. The initiative was moving forward, because, finally, he had allowed himself to trust in others and in the power of collaboration. The road to a sustainable future was still long, and the challenges remained daunting. But Elon Musk, standing at the intersection of ambition and humility, knew that the future he was building wasn't just his own. It was everyone's. Months had passed since the summit where Musk had reignited the flame of hope among his global initiative team. The energy and commitment from everyone involved had surged in the wake of his honest reflections. The setbacks seemed like distant memories now, as the momentum of their work pushed forward with a renewed sense of purpose. The renewable energy grid Musk had envisioned, one that would span several countries and provide clean, sustainable power to millions, was finally ready for its initial launch. It was the culmination of years of hard work, collaboration, and the overcoming of seemingly insurmountable obstacles. Yet, standing at the helm of this monumental achievement, Musk felt an unexpected sense of calm. The intensity of the last few years, the pressure, the failures, the relentless pursuit of progress, had finally given way to a quiet understanding. This wasn't just the fulfillment of his vision. This was a new beginning, not just for him, but for everyone who would benefit from the change they had worked so hard to bring about. Musk had always been known for pushing boundaries and striving for the impossible, but now, in the final moments before the grid went live, he realized that his greatest success wasn't the technology, it was the way it had brought people together. He stood on the rooftop of a Tesla facility, overlooking the city as the sun dipped below the horizon. The lights of the city began to flicker on, and in that moment, Musk felt something profound. The technology they had created would change the world. It would provide energy to communities that had long been underserved, it would reduce humanity's dependence on fossil fuels, and it would pave the way for a more sustainable future. But more than that, it represented a fundamental shift in how people approached collaboration and progress. The sound of footsteps behind him brought him out of his reverie. It was Gwynne Shotwell, the president of SpaceX, and a close friend and colleague. She joined him on the rooftop, standing by his side as they both gazed out at the city. "We did it, Elon," she said softly, her voice carrying both pride and relief. "It's really happening." Musk nodded, his mind still processing the weight of it all. "It's happening," he repeated, almost in disbelief. "But it's not just the technology. It's the people. This is what really matters." Gwynne smiled, sensing that Musk had come full circle. She had known him for years, had seen him through countless challenges and triumphs, and she understood that this was more than just a business milestone for him. It was a personal transformation. "You've changed, Elon," she said, her voice warm with understanding. "I think you've finally realized that you don't have to do it all alone. That it's not about being the lone genius at the top, it's about empowering everyone around you to make a difference." Musk looked at her, a rare softness in his eyes. "I used to think that it was all on me. That I had to carry the burden of the future on my own. But now I see that it's about collaboration. It's about creating something bigger than any one person. And it's about trusting that everyone, no matter where they come from or what they do, has something valuable to contribute. There was a moment of silence between them, as the weight of Musk's words settled in. Both of them had been through so much, years of uncertainty, doubt, and the unrelenting pressure to succeed. But now, they were standing on the precipice of something that felt truly transformative. They had succeeded not just because of their technology, but because they had learned the importance of connection, of bringing people together for a common purpose. As the first wave of energy from the new grid began to flow, Musk felt a deep sense of accomplishment. The lights that illuminated the city below were more than just a sign of progress, they were a symbol of the collective effort that had brought them to this point. It was no longer just about his vision, it was about the shared vision of countless individuals who had come together to make the impossible a reality. For the first time in a long while, Musk felt peace. The journey had been long and filled with trials, but he knew that this was just the beginning. There was still much to be done, many challenges to face, and new frontiers to explore. But the foundation had been laid, a foundation built on collaboration, innovation, and a shared commitment to a better future. He turned to Gwyn and smiled. "You know, I think we might have just done something that could actually change the world." Gwyn laughed softly. "I think you might be right." As the night deepened and the city lights sparkled in the distance, Musk took a moment to reflect on everything that had led him here, the doubts, the struggles, the failures, and ultimately, the growth. He had learned that while technology could change the world, it was the people behind the technology, their shared purpose, their commitment to each other, that would ultimately shape the future. And in that quiet moment, standing alongside the people he trusted most, Elon Musk realized that his legacy would not be defined by the companies he built, or even the groundbreaking technology he had developed. His legacy would be defined by the connections he had fostered, the people he had inspired, and the collective vision that had brought them all together. The journey was far from over. But for the first time, Musk knew that the path ahead was brighter than ever before. The success of the Global Energy Initiative marked a pivotal moment in human history. What had begun as an ambitious, almost impossible dream was now a fully operational reality. The renewable energy grid, stretching across continents, provided clean, sustainable power to millions. It had already started to reshape the lives of countless families, offering them a future once thought unattainable. And as the global community celebrated this achievement, Elon Musk found himself standing at the crossroads of his journey, facing an entirely new set of challenges and opportunities. But as much as the world marveled at the progress made, Musk knew that the hard work was far from over. The world was changing, and with it, new obstacles would arise. The fight for sustainability was far from complete, and the journey to the future was still uncertain. Yet, for the first time in his life, Musk wasn't consumed by the need to lead it all alone. His experience over the past months, and his realization that change could only be achieved through collaboration, had shaped his thinking. Musk had become more comfortable sharing the mantle of leadership with those around him, knowing that the next phase of humanity's transformation would require more than just innovation, it would require unity. There were still technological hurdles to overcome, political challenges to navigate, and a rapidly evolving global landscape to monitor. But the foundation had been set, and Musk knew that the next chapter would focus on scaling, refining, and, most importantly, ensuring that these advancements reached the people who needed them most. One morning, as Musk stood before a group of engineers, scientists, and business leaders, he realized that his vision was no longer just about grand inventions or groundbreaking projects. The future he envisioned wasn't just shaped by technology, it was about building resilient systems that would ensure a sustainable and just world for future generations. The energy grid we've built is just the beginning, Musk began, addressing the team. What we've accomplished is monumental, but it's only a part of a much larger vision. The real question is, how do we take this success and use it to create a world where every person, regardless of their background or where they live, has access to the same opportunities? The room fell silent as everyone absorbed Musk's words. There was a sense of anticipation, not just because of what had already been achieved, but because of what was yet to come. The scope of Musk's vision had always been boundless, but now it had a deeper purpose. "We're not just building technology," Musk continued. "We're building a future. We're talking about a future where no one is left behind, where access to clean energy, education, healthcare, and economic opportunity is available to all. We're talking about a world where humanity isn't just surviving, we're thriving. And to get there, we need to think beyond just one project, one country, one innovation. We need to build interconnected systems, share knowledge, and ensure that these advancements reach every corner of the globe." As Musk finished speaking, there was a palpable shift in the room. The engineers and business leaders looked at each other, understanding that this was no longer just a corporate mission. This was a call to arms. A call to unite behind a cause much greater than profit, fame, or individual success. In the weeks that followed, Musk's team set their sights on an even larger initiative, an initiative to create a global platform for sustainable innovation. This platform would bring together the brightest minds, the most talented engineers, the best policymakers, and the most passionate activists to tackle some of the world's most pressing challenges. Clean energy, food security, climate change, and social justice would all be addressed under one umbrella, working hand in hand to create systemic change. Musk had learned that true leadership wasn't about being the sole visionary, it was about empowering others to become visionaries in their own right. With this understanding, he worked tirelessly to build a coalition of like-minded leaders, each contributing their expertise and unique perspectives to the cause. The global platform they created would serve as a nexus for innovation, a space where solutions to global problems would be developed and implemented, not just by one company, but by the collective power of humanity. As the platform began to take shape, it attracted attention from all corners of the globe. Governments, nonprofits, universities, and corporations all joined the movement. People from different walks of life, from small villages in Africa to urban centers in North America, began to see the possibilities that this new world offered. They weren't just passive recipients of change, they were active participants in creating that change. For Musk, the most profound realization came as he visited one of the rural communities where the new energy grid had been implemented. He stood in the center of a village, watching as the once dark streets were now illuminated by clean, sustainable power. Children were studying under bright lights, women were running small businesses powered by solar energy, and families were cooking meals with clean, affordable power. In that moment, as he watched the transformation unfold before him, Musk felt an overwhelming sense of fulfillment. This wasn't just about his legacy or even the impact of his companies. It was about the lives being changed. It was about the hope being restored. It was about the future that was no longer a distant dream but a tangible reality for millions of people. That night, Musk sat by a campfire with a group of community leaders. They shared stories of their struggles, their hopes, and their dreams. As he listened to them speak about how their lives had changed since the energy grid was introduced, he realized that this was the real measure of success. It wasn't the headlines or the accolades, it was the tangible, meaningful impact on people's lives. As the fire crackled in the quiet of the night, Musk reflected on his own journey. He had come so far, from the early days of struggling to keep his companies afloat to now, standing at the helm of a global movement. He had learned that the road to progress was never linear. There would always be setbacks, challenges, and doubts along the way. But the key was to keep moving forward, to keep learning, and to keep believing in the power of human collaboration. He looked up at the stars, feeling a deep sense of peace and purpose. The future was bright, not just because of the technology they had created, but because of the people who had come together to make it all possible. Elon Musk had always dreamed of changing the world. Now, he had come to realize that it wasn't just about the changes he could bring. It was about the world they would all create together. The momentum of Musk's global platform continued to build, gaining traction with every passing day. What had begun as a small idea, a way to use innovation and technology for the greater good, had transformed into a sprawling movement. Across the globe, communities were benefiting from the renewable energy grid, and the other initiatives launched alongside it were beginning to address issues like poverty, education, and healthcare in meaningful ways. But while the success was undeniable, the ripple effects of this transformative shift were only just beginning to take shape. Elon Musk had spent much of his career focused on disrupting industries, pushing boundaries, and challenging the status quo. Yet, as he looked at the global impact of the platform he had helped build, he realized that the true power of innovation wasn't about changing the rules of the game, it was about changing the game itself. The first indicators of change were small but impactful. In remote areas that had once been left behind, new businesses were flourishing. In regions of the world where people struggled to access electricity, entire economies were now powered by sustainable energy. The introduction of affordable energy solutions was allowing farmers in Africa to irrigate crops efficiently, students in Asia to attend online classes, and families in South America to cook meals without the toxic fumes of traditional fuels. The work that had been done was undeniably positive, but Musk couldn't help but think of the bigger picture. There were still so many more places to reach, so many more people to lift up. He had learned that real progress came not only through innovation but also by making sure the benefits were equitable. As the global platform grew, so did the complexity of the challenges that lay ahead. One of the first major steps in expanding the platform's reach was the establishment of a series of partnerships with governments, NGOs, and local organizations. Musk had always been critical of bureaucracy and government inefficiencies, but he knew that in order to truly create systemic change, collaboration with these entities was essential. After all, the power of innovation could only be fully realized when it was integrated into the structures of society itself. Musk met with global leaders, some of whom were initially skeptical of his platform. Governments, even those with a focus on sustainability, were slow to adopt new ideas, especially ones that had the potential to disrupt existing power structures. But Musk was relentless. He knew the power of his platform could unlock a new era of growth and opportunity, and he wasn't willing to let obstacles stop him. "Look," Musk said in a meeting with a delegation of European leaders. "This isn't just about energy or technology. This is about building a world that's resilient, sustainable, and just. We can create millions of jobs, uplift entire communities, and fight climate change all at once. The technology works. The people are ready. Now it's about making sure everyone has a seat at the table." He wasn't just selling a product, he was selling a vision. And slowly, more and more governments and organizations began to buy into it. In the weeks that followed, governments began to sign agreements, committing to integrate Musk's renewable energy infrastructure into their national grids. In places where the challenges were most pressing, these initiatives were met with enthusiasm and urgency. Countries in Africa, Southeast Asia, and parts of Central America, who had been historically underserved in terms of energy access, were among the first to embrace the platform's offerings. Back in the United States, Musk's platform had become an essential component of the country's green energy agenda. The White House had publicly endorsed the platform, and bipartisan support for the initiative was growing. As the U.S. government moved forward with plans to overhaul its energy systems, the platform played a central role in their long-term strategy. But it wasn't just governments that were being impacted. Musk saw firsthand how industries around the world were adapting to the new sustainable economy. The fossil fuel industry, which had once been the backbone of many national economies, was now facing an undeniable shift. While some major players in the energy sector had fought the transition to renewable sources tooth and nail, others began to pivot, seeing the writing on the wall. Oil companies were now investing in green energy initiatives, realizing that the future of energy wasn't in drilling for oil, it was in harnessing the power of the sun, wind, and water. Musk's platform had inspired a transformation within the corporate world, as companies began to understand that innovation, not tradition, would define their future success. At the same time, a new breed of entrepreneurs emerged. Inspired by Musk's example, they were eager to create their own solutions to the world's problems. The platform became a launch pad for thousands of startups working on everything from sustainable agriculture and waste management to affordable healthcare and next-generation education technologies. This new generation of innovators was united by a shared purpose, to build a future that was not just technologically advanced, but socially responsible. Musk had always believed that the most profound innovations didn't just solve problems, they created new possibilities. And as he witnessed the transformation taking place across the globe, he realized that this was the true power of his platform. It wasn't just about technology, it was about empowering individuals and communities to take ownership of their futures. One of the most impactful moments for Musk came when he visited a rural village in India, where a microgrid powered entirely by solar energy had been established. The community was thriving. Children were able to study at night, women were running businesses, and families were living healthier, more prosperous lives. As he spoke with the village leaders, one of them told him, "We were waiting for a revolution, and it has arrived. This isn't just about energy, it's about hope. You've shown us that a different future is possible." Those words struck Musk deeply. For all the global headlines, for all the technological breakthroughs, it was moments like this that truly defined the impact of his work. It wasn't just about transforming industries or building cutting-edge technology, it was about the people whose lives were being improved. As the platform continued to grow and evolve, Musk knew that the journey wasn't over. The ripple effects were still unfolding, and there was still so much to do. But he also knew that humanity was on the brink of something extraordinary, a future where innovation, collaboration, and compassion could create a world where everyone had the opportunity to thrive. Standing on the precipice of this new era, Musk reflected on the transformation he had undergone himself. He had gone from the solitary genius, obsessed with achieving the impossible, to a leader who understood that the true power of progress lay in bringing people together. And in that understanding, Musk had found not just success, but fulfillment, a deeper, more meaningful purpose. The world was changing, and Musk was no longer at the center of it all. Instead, he was a part of something much bigger, a movement that was reshaping the future, one step at a time. As Elon Musk watched the progress of the global initiative unfold, he couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. The ripple effect of the platform was growing, and the world was beginning to experience the early benefits of a greener, more sustainable future. However, like any ambitious project of such scale, the journey was far from smooth. For every victory, there were those who resisted. The road to transformation was not just paved with innovation, it was also filled with obstacles that tested the very core of Musk's beliefs. The resistance wasn't unexpected. Musk had always known that challenging the status quo would bring opposition, but the magnitude of the opposition was something he hadn't fully anticipated. The fossil fuel industry, despite the shift toward renewable energy, was not going down without a fight. Powerful lobbies, entrenched interests, and even entire sectors of the global economy still depended on the old energy paradigm. And they were not ready to relinquish their grip so easily. One evening, after a long day of meetings with partners and stakeholders, Musk received a call from his head of public relations, Maria. "Elon, there's been a backlash, specifically, a coordinated smear campaign. It's gaining traction in some of the media outlets," she informed him. Musk's brow furrowed. "What's the nature of the campaign?" "Essentially, they're trying to discredit the platform, calling it unreliable, too expensive, and impractical for large-scale adoption. They're painting it as an overly idealistic project that's hurting the traditional economy. They've even brought up the issue of job loss in sectors tied to the old energy industries. It's a well-funded, coordinated attack." Musk was quiet for a moment, absorbing the news. The smear campaign was not just a nuisance, it was a full-scale assault on the very vision he had spent years cultivating. While he had anticipated some opposition, this was different. It wasn't just about politics or competition, it was about controlling the narrative. "Do we have any evidence of who's behind it?" Musk asked, his voice steady but with an underlying intensity. Maria hesitated for a moment before replying, "We've traced some of the funding back to a few of the largest oil companies. They're pushing a fear-based agenda." But there are also some well-known media figures involved, ones with close ties to these companies. The realization hit Musk hard. The battle wasn't just technological or political, it was ideological. The fight wasn't just for the future of energy, it was for the future of humanity itself. He knew that this kind of resistance was inevitable, but it still stung. The next few days were a whirlwind of strategy meetings, press releases, and public relations efforts to counteract the misinformation. Musk, ever the advocate for transparency, understood that the best way to combat these attacks was not through more grandiose claims or even defensive rhetoric, it was through action. So, he decided to take a different approach. He would show the world the real impact of the platform. The next phase of his strategy was a global tour. Musk planned to visit communities and countries where the platform had already been implemented. He would meet with local leaders, speak with residents, and, most importantly, showcase the tangible benefits the platform was providing. His plan was simple: let the people who had been directly impacted by the technology tell the story. The first stop on his tour was a rural village in the United States that had recently been connected to the global energy grid. He arrived with a small team, carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders but determined to turn the tide of public opinion. The village had been without consistent power for decades, and now, thanks to the renewable energy grid, it was thriving. Businesses were growing, children were studying at night, and the local school was now equipped with modern technologies. As Musk walked through the village, he was greeted by smiling faces, people who were eager to show him how their lives had changed. The town's mayor, a woman named Laura, greeted him warmly. "We've never had anything like this before, Elon," she said, her eyes bright with gratitude. "The changes we've seen have been beyond what we could have hoped for. But more than that, it's the sense of possibility that this energy has brought. We're not just surviving anymore, we're thriving." Musk spent the entire day talking to the residents, farmers, teachers, small business owners, all of whom spoke about how the energy grid had transformed their lives. For many, it was more than just electricity, it was the foundation for a new future. "I think people in cities forget what it's like to not have access to power," said Henry, a local farmer. "We used to rely on diesel generators that were expensive and polluted the air. Now, we've got clean, affordable energy, and it's helping us grow our crops, our businesses, and even our community. This technology is changing everything for us." Musk listened intently, deeply moved by the stories he heard. These were the voices that needed to be heard, real people with real stories. This was the evidence he needed to counter the narrative being spun by his detractors. A few weeks later, he was in a similar village in Africa, where solar-powered microgrids were providing the first reliable electricity these communities had ever experienced. In one town, residents had formed a cooperative to manage the solar infrastructure, and the local economy was booming. Small businesses were flourishing, children were attending school in the evenings, and healthcare services had improved dramatically thanks to the reliable power source. As Musk toured the sites and spoke with the community leaders, it became increasingly clear that the true power of his platform lay not just in its technology, but in its ability to unlock potential. The opposition's narrative of unreliability and failure couldn't hold up in the face of the positive change happening on the ground. In the face of mounting resistance, Musk decided to take a bold step. He would address the public directly, bypassing traditional media channels and going straight to the people. Using his massive social media following, he began posting videos, photos, and updates from his travels. In each post, he shared the stories of the people whose lives had been transformed by the renewable energy grid. Within days, the narrative began to shift. People who had once been skeptical of the platform now saw it in a different light. They saw the tangible, real-world impact, and it was undeniable. Musk wasn't just a billionaire with a big idea, he was a man committed to improving the world, and his efforts were making a difference. The resistance was still strong, but Musk had gained something more powerful than public relations victories. He had the trust of the people who mattered most, the people whose lives were changing for the better. And with that trust came an unstoppable force. As Elon Musk's tour continued, the tide began to shift in ways he had not anticipated. The grassroots support for the platform, born from the voices of those directly impacted, started to snowball. Social media was buzzing with stories of lives changed, families empowered, and communities revitalized. The opposition, once so vocal and confident, began to lose ground as the very people they claimed to represent started to stand up and tell their own stories. The tipping point was near. The media outlets that had once aired critical, misleading reports began to receive feedback from viewers and listeners. The narrative of failure was starting to crack as ordinary people shared their own success stories, stories of homes that no longer relied on dangerous, polluting fuels, stories of children learning in classrooms that had never had power before, and stories of businesses that were now thriving in areas that had once been left in the dark. Musk sat in his office one afternoon, scrolling through social media, when he saw a post that caught his eye. It was a simple message from a local teacher in a remote village in India, a place he had visited just weeks earlier. The post read, "The new solar-powered school is the first school in our region with electricity. For the first time, my students have access to computers, and they are learning about the world. Thank you, Elon Musk. You have changed our future." The comments were flooded with more stories from teachers, farmers, entrepreneurs, and everyday people, all recounting how their lives had improved. What struck Musk the most was the sincerity in each post. These weren't just tweets or Instagram posts, these were life-changing moments that were being shared in real time. In the following days, a seismic shift began to take place in the media. The same news outlets that had been part of the smear campaign started covering the personal stories, focusing on the undeniable positive changes that had taken place. Politicians who had been skeptical about Musk's platform were now calling for increased investment in renewable energy, citing the success stories from around the world. The mainstream media was slowly turning, not because of Musk's argument, but because the proof was too strong to ignore. It wasn't just the media that was shifting. Other business leaders who had once been critical of Musk's platform began to take note. As the public demand for clean, affordable energy grew, major corporations started investing heavily in renewable technologies. Rivals who had once derided Musk's ideas were now scrambling to catch up, looking for ways to incorporate similar technologies into their own business models. Even traditional energy companies, those that had resisted the shift for years, found themselves at a crossroads. It was no longer a matter of whether they could afford to adopt clean energy, it was a matter of whether they could afford not to. The financial markets were beginning to reward companies that embraced renewable energy, and the ones that stuck with fossil fuels were slowly losing favor. Musk's vision, once seen as a risky bet, was now starting to feel like a self-fulfilling prophecy. The investments, the partnerships, and the projects that had once been a distant dream were now an unstoppable juggernaut. However, even as the momentum seemed unstoppable, Musk was keenly aware that the final victory wasn't just about market share or media attention, it was about global transformation. And despite the overwhelming success, there were still so many people who were left out of the conversation, still so many places where the energy revolution had yet to reach. "I've always said that technology alone doesn't solve problems," Musk remarked during a private meeting with his team. "It's how we use that technology. The world is changing, but we have to make sure that everyone is part of that change. There's still a lot of work to do." And Musk was right. There were still communities struggling to get access to clean water, proper education, and sustainable agriculture. In many regions, the local governments were slow to adapt, still clinging to outdated policies that hindered innovation. And while the platform was a success in many areas, Musk knew that the true victory wouldn't come until every corner of the world had access to the same opportunities. It was this awareness that spurred him to take even bolder steps. Musk began to push for partnerships with international development organizations, asking them to join forces in a global effort to address systemic issues like poverty, lack of education, and healthcare access. One such partnership, which Musk dubbed the Global Empowerment Initiative, would focus on bringing renewable energy to the poorest and most remote regions, while also providing the tools for local businesses and communities to thrive. This initiative was different from anything that had come before, it wasn't just about providing energy, it was about building a future that was self-sustaining. The initiative's first major project was in the heart of sub-Saharan Africa, where millions of people still lived without access to reliable electricity. Musk and his team worked alongside local governments and NGOs to set up solar-powered microgrids that would bring electricity to remote villages. These microgrids weren't just about providing power, they were about creating jobs, building infrastructure, and providing the foundation for local economies to flourish. The results were staggering. Within the first year, several thousand communities had been connected, and businesses were opening up in areas that had previously been too isolated to support commerce. Children in these areas were attending school for the first time, and medical clinics were operating more efficiently with reliable power sources. The success of the Global Empowerment Initiative wasn't just a victory for Musk, it was a victory for the world. It proved that large-scale change was possible, that technology could be used for good, and that the future wasn't something to fear but something to embrace. Musk watched the impact of the initiative from his office, overwhelmed by the stories of transformation. One message in particular stood out. It was from a teacher in a village that had been recently electrified. She wrote, "I can teach my students in the evening now. They are learning about math, science, and the world. This is the future. This is what we needed." In that moment, Musk knew that they had passed the tipping point. The momentum was now unstoppable. The shift from fossil fuels to renewable energy was no longer a theory, it was a reality, and it was only just beginning. Elon Musk sat in the quiet of his office, watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky with shades of red and gold. The world outside seemed as if it had caught up with his vision, transforming before his very eyes. He had spent his life battling skepticism, redefining industries, and constantly pushing the boundaries of what was possible. Yet, this moment, more than any other, felt like the culmination of everything he had worked toward. It wasn't just the numbers or the accolades that made him proud, but the tangible, human impact, the lives that had been changed because of his relentless pursuit of a cleaner, more sustainable world. Musk's thoughts wandered back to the early days, to the first conversations about revolutionizing energy, to the countless nights spent working on designs, prototypes, and solutions that seemed impossible. He had known from the start that he was trying to change the very fabric of society, an endeavor that would be met with resistance, doubt, and fear. But now, looking at the world that had shifted toward a renewable future, he couldn't help but feel that, for once, the impossible had become real. The resistance that had once seemed insurmountable was now fading into the background. The narrative had shifted from one of skepticism and fear to one of hope and possibility. Governments, once hesitant to embrace his ideas, were now partnering with his companies to lead the charge. The energy landscape had been irrevocably altered, and it was only the beginning. But even as Musk looked back at his accomplishments with satisfaction, he knew that the journey was far from over. The global energy transition was still in its infancy, and there were billions more people who still needed access to sustainable energy, clean water, education, and economic opportunity. Musk had always said that success wasn't just about building a business, it was about creating a lasting, positive change in the world. And for him, the fight for a better future was only just beginning. To mark the turning of this new chapter, Musk held a global summit, bringing together world leaders, business magnates, scientists, and community activists to discuss the future of energy, technology, and humanity. It was a gathering of minds, but also a celebration of what they had collectively achieved. Musk stood before the crowd, taking a deep breath as he prepared to address the world one last time in this phase of the journey. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice calm but filled with passion, "today, we stand at a crossroads. For years, we've been told that we couldn't achieve the kind of future we've dreamed of, that a clean, sustainable world was nothing but a fantasy. But as we look around us, we see that fantasy becoming reality. The future is no longer an abstract idea, it is now something we are living in. It's something we've built, together." He paused, scanning the faces in the crowd, knowing that they had all been part of this incredible transformation. From scientists to entrepreneurs to everyday citizens, everyone had played a role. But let's not stop here, Musk continued. We've built the foundations, but the real work is just beginning. Our next challenge is to ensure that every single person on this planet has access to the resources, the tools, and the opportunities they need to thrive. It's not just about renewable energy, it's about access to clean water, education, healthcare, and economic empowerment. It's about creating a world where every person, no matter where they're born, can live up to their potential. The crowd erupted into applause, the energy in the room electric. Musk's words were not just a call to action, they were a declaration of what the future could be, a future built on the values of sustainability, equality, and innovation. In the months that followed the summit, Musk and his team continued to push forward. The expansion of the renewable energy grid, now a global network, provided power to more than half of the world's population. Solar-powered microgrids were installed in every corner of the world, from the deserts of Africa to the mountains of South America, ensuring that no one was left behind. The platform that had once been seen as a distant dream was now the cornerstone of a new, interconnected world. But it wasn't just energy that Musk was focused on. He pushed for advancements in other critical areas, including clean water solutions, regenerative agriculture, and space exploration. His company SpaceX, which had been focused on getting humans to Mars, now had a new mission, making life multiplanetary, yes, but also ensuring that Earth, our only home for now, was preserved for future generations. One of the most exciting developments was the launch of an educational initiative that partnered with schools worldwide. Musk's companies provided resources and funding for schools in underserved areas, offering students access to advanced technology, internet connectivity, and even virtual lessons with experts in various fields. This was a future-proof investment in the minds of the next generation. Throughout it all, Musk maintained his usual approach: stay focused, work hard, and continue to push forward. He had always believed that success was not an individual achievement, but a collective one. This was a world-changing movement, and he was just one part of it. Every innovation, every breakthrough, was a result of the efforts of countless individuals working together to create something better for everyone. And so, as the years passed, the vision Musk had fought for began to take root. Renewable energy became the global standard, poverty rates dropped dramatically, and education and healthcare improved in every corner of the world. The economies that had once relied on fossil fuels now thrived through clean energy, technology, and innovation. The world was entering a new era, one of sustainability, equality, and boundless potential. In a small corner of the world, in a village once without power, a young girl sat at a desk, learning how to code. Her eyes sparkled with possibility as she realized that, like everyone else, she now had the chance to shape the future. For her, and for millions of others, the world that Musk had helped create was not just a dream, it was her reality. And in that moment, as Musk looked at the endless horizon of possibilities, he realized that the greatest achievement was not the global empire he had built, but the fact that he had been part of creating a world where anyone, anywhere, could dream big and make those dreams come true. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?